Everybody, my name is Mike. I'm one of the leaders here at Ocean City Church. Usually Derek would be here, but he kind of has a weekend off. He's been in a hotel all weekend in Fernandina. But we are here at 10 o'clock. Leslie's very confusing on all of the times. I will pray for all of us next week. Okay, so we have been in our storied series. We're going over kind of basically famous Bible people, and kind of just talking about just them and maybe stories about them that maybe we're not used to hearing. So today, we are going to be talking about Daniel, okay? So Daniel in the Lion's Den, classic, right? This is like Felt Board 101, if you remember that from your kid days. Everyone is probably familiar with this story. One thing that I learned this week, actually, in preparing, is when Daniel in the Lion's Den happened, Daniel was 80 or 90 years old. Did you know? I didn't know this. My felt board did not have an old guy with a cane getting shoved into the lion's den, right? That's not what the felt board was. And it's wild because that story had happened at the end of Israel's 70-year exile in Babylon. And there was a lot that happened before we get to the lion's den. So today, we're going to be looking at a story in Daniel chapter 2. But before we get there, we need to have a little bit of context of just where we are in the Bible. One thing, we're about there, so that's context number one. Right about there, kind of in the middle-ish. Last week, Derek talked about David. So let's kind of go from David to where we are. So David, he was kind of king number 2. His son Solomon, under Solomon's rule, Israel grew to its peak in strength and wealth. And then after Solomon, Israel, the people, they kind of split in two. Northern kingdom, Israel, southern kingdom, Judah. Northern kingdom had about 19 kings. They were all pretty horrible. They led Israel astray. They worshipped idols, and God let the Assyrians conquer the northern kingdom. Judah, the southern kingdom, they also had 19 kings. Some were good, but most were bad. And again, the same thing. They kind of led the people astray, kind of abandoned their relationship with God. And God actually, through Nebuchadnezzar, who we're going to talk a lot about today, conquered Israel. He was the leader of Babylon at the time. So part of that conquering, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylon Empire took kind of prominent Israelites to Israel. That was kind of the first wave of exile. And Daniel was one of those people. He was a noble Jewish young man, maybe good looking, I don't know, who knows. And with him, they also took lots of people, but 3 of his buddies. They are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. You may know them by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they were all tight, like a boy band, I guess, going to Babylon. So, and once they got to Babylon, they were recruited to train as wise men for the Babylon Empire, to serve the king. And ultimately, part of this training and the goal was to kind of assimilate them into Babylonian culture, to where their Jewish heritage, their Jewish religion, their relationship with God would kind of just over time evaporate, and they would kind of be just brought into the Babylonian Empire. And that was the intent, yet Daniel and his 3 buddies, the boy band, they remained faithful to God this whole time, and God blessed them, and actually they graduated top of their class at Babylon U, or whatever it was, and they joined the court of the wise men for Nebuchadnezzar the king. So that kind of catches us up in our narrative arc of the Bible. And today our story, we are going to be in Daniel chapter 2. And we're going to start by reading the beginning part of it together. So it should be on the screen. Bada bing. Okay, so in the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream and we will interpret it." The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." Once more, they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king answered, "I am certain that you are trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping this situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologers answered the king, "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans." This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree?" Arioch then explained this matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went to the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. He urged them to plead to God for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. Okay, I know it was a little long, but that was crazy. And we're going to dig in. So today we're going to review 3 questions in relation to this story. The first is, how did Nebuchadnezzar react to a threat to his kingdom? Second, how did Daniel react? And lastly, how do we get the power to approach life's threats? So first, how did Nebuchadnezzar react to a threat to his kingdom? So one theme throughout the entire book of Daniel is that of kings and kingdoms. You see it kind of in the narrative that we just read and other narratives and stories. In Daniel is also, the fiery furnace story with Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. It's a tongue twister. And then there's all kinds of also prophecies about kings and kingdoms in the rest of the book of Daniel. And I think, in a sense, we are all kind of kings of our own kingdoms, if you will. So little kings, we can kind of customize anything we want, like these days. If you can be the king of how you look. You can buy whatever you want and look however you want. Doesn't mean you're going to look good, but you can try, right? You can be the king of your phone. Which apps are the best apps? I know we all like debate all that stuff. Lots of people make fun of me for my Android phone and say that's not good, but I am the king of that phone. And Apple is the king of your phone, so there. We act like kings when we go to restaurants. Do I want another drink? Yes, I want another drink. I will order this thing. Please bring it to me in a silver platter. And this is so funny, even the seats of our car, we can be the kings. There are so many buttons now. I rented a car recently. There's like 12 buttons. It's the thing this way. There's something that hits your back. You can heat it. You can cool it. You can do all of these things. You can be king of your car seat. Every once in a while, my wife will borrow my car and drive it around, and then I get in and my knees hit the steering wheel because she pulled it up, and she's messing with my kingdom. What is she doing? We all have our little K kind of kingdoms in our life, of all shapes, all sizes. They look all kinds of different things. One of your kingdoms might be like a kingdom at work, right? You might have this nice cubicle. I keep my cubicle nice and neat. I don't care about those like that. That's a horrible kingdom over there, all kind of messy, but mine is nice and neat and tight. You might have a kingdom of maybe people that are on your team and you're leading them to victory. You might be the king of your fantasy football team, deciding who must sit and who must start on your fantasy football team. You might be a little kingdom of your routine, right? I do it this way. This is the right way to do it. We're going to follow the routine. Anything that messes with that, you're messing with my kingdom. Better watch out. A little kingdom might be your kids. A little kingdom might be your reputation, your identity. A little kingdom might be your maybe financial security. So let's learn a little bit today about King Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom that he had built for himself. So Nebuchadnezzar, he grew up watching his dad defeat the Assyrians. Now, at this time, the Assyrians were like the world power. They were like the big empire at the time. And he saw his dad defeat them. And his dad kind of he deteriorated in health. Nebuchadnezzar rose up and he kind of continued the conquering for Babylon all the way from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. And that's modern day Iraq, Syria, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan. He conquered all of that. And at this time, the Babylonian Empire is now the world power. And not only was Nebuchadnezzar a conqueror and an emperor, he was also known as a builder. So during his reign, Babylon, the city, actually peaked. It was the first city in history to reach 200,000 people, which they don't have suburbs or transit or whatever. That is a lot of people that just walk around. That is a huge city at the time. In it, he built numerous temples and palaces. According to one legend that I read, it's debatable if it's true, but I think it's cool. He is credited with building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world alongside the pyramids. So whoa. One thing he was particularly proud of was the Ishtar Gate. I have a picture of it. I thought it was cool. This is a replica in a Berlin museum. The real thing was actually 3 times as wide. It was massive. He was very proud of this. This was an entry gate into Babylon. And he wrote an inscription. He was so proud. This is what the inscription says. That gives you some clues about Nebuchadnezzar. It says this. It said, do we have it up there? Yep. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the faithful prince, appointed by the will of Marduk, the highest of princely princes, beloved of Nabu, that's his dad, of prudent counsel, who has learned to embrace wisdom. I hung doors of cedar adorned with bronze at all the gate openings. I placed wild bulls and ferocious dragons in the gateways, and thus adorned them with luxurious splendor, that people might gaze on them in wonder. Learn to embrace wisdom. He's feeling really good about himself right now, basically, right? He can do anything he wants, and he's doing all kinds of cool stuff. But what's wild is, so this description, he calls himself, he's learned to embrace wisdom. So think about that in light of this story that we just read. How did he go from that to going absolute psycho level on the wise men, right? This is a huge turn. And let's go back and look at the beginning of our chapter. Verse 1, it said, in the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So in ancient times, dreams are a big deal. Several times in scriptures and several times in the book of Daniel, dreams are used they're prophetic. They are telling the future. People pay a lot of attention to them. That is why Nebuchadnezzar has all these astrologers and enchanters and wise men to help kind of maybe see the future and be able to react to it. I don't know if dreams are still a big deal. I never remember dreams, except for one. There was a nightmare when I was 6 years old. And I remember it vividly. Maybe it is a big deal. I don't know. I remember I was in my grandma's house. I was walking around, and all of the furniture, like couches and lamps and fans and stuff, started to come alive and chase me and spit acid at me. This is my dream. So I'm running through the house. I'm 6 years old. I'm terrified. I finally make it out of the house into the driveway. And on the lawn, there is a neatly folded dress shirt that transforms into a tank that also shoots acid at me. And then I wake up. So hopefully that's not prophetic, I guess. I don't know. Hasn't happened yet, so that's good. But this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had was troubling his mind so much that he could not sleep. So the level of anxiety and worry was so high because of this dream that he couldn't even sleep. His anxiety over the future, over this prophetic dream, and not knowing what it meant was disrupting his life. And I think we can all relate to that. So later in chapter 2, we learn what Nebuchadnezzar's dream is, the dream that is causing this fear and anxiety. And the dream is this. He dreamt of a great image that there was a head of gold, a chest of, silver, arms of silver, torso and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of iron and clay. And there was a rock that came and hit this image, and it broke into pieces, and then the rock grew into a giant mountain that covered the whole earth. That was the dream, right? Now, remember at this point, Babylon is the world power, right? You are on top with it's the biggest city in the history of the world. It's got all these great buildings and temples and everything. So when you are at the top, there is only one direction to go, right? So I am thinking, and I don't think it's too much of a stretch, that what was troubling Nebuchadnezzar is that this beautiful, amazing kingdom empire that he had built was going to be destroyed. And this is what is causing him this level of anxiety about the future that he just can't even sleep. And he goes immediately into action. He gets his wise men together. We're going to figure out what the heck is going on to my kingdom so that I can figure out how to stop it. And we do the same thing, right? So what if our little K kingdoms, if you will, what if one of yours is your reputation, right? And somebody, falsely blames you for something that you did not do, right? That was not your fault. Do we just remember, this is your kingdom. Do we just kind of sit around and say, well, yeah, whatever. Let's just see how this plays out. It's no, this is your kingdom we're talking about here. We are going to set the record straight. Maybe we're going to go on the offensive and tell some things that person did that they didn't fail to mention, right? This is your kingdom. Let's say theoretically, maybe your kingdom is a neat and tidy house, and you love that neat and tidy house. And your kids are playing in the mud, which you told them not to do because the kids are the worst. And they come in and make the house dirty, and they don't clean it up. You theoretically clean it up all the time. And so, by royal decree for your kingdom, you say, you shall not come in the house. You will go in the backyard, and you will strip down, and you will use the hose for your shower before you enter my kingdom. Thank you very much. Theoretically, kids, you will not walk that way through my kingdom on the way to the bathtub. So likewise, Nebuchadnezzar, he assembles his wise men. He's like, we are going to do something about this. We are not just going to let this fly. My kingdom must be protected, and I'm going to figure out how to stop this threat. And then there's this crazy, fascinating turn. So, as we see from the text that we read, the wise men, this isn't the first time a dream has come up. They know the drill, right? They come in, and the drill is, we come in, the king's like, oh my gosh, I had this dream. And they say, well, tell us the dream. And he tells them the dream, and then they say in all of their wisdom and service to the king what their advice is and wisdom is for them. And not this time, right? The king summons them, and I can just imagine them saying, all right, here we go, wise men, round it up. We're going to help the king. We're going to be the go-to guys. And in our great wisdom, we will help the king. And then the king says this to them. The king replied to the astrologers, this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. And what's wild, if you remember what we just read, I feel like the wise men are like, he didn't mean that. Let's just try it again. Let's just reset, and we'll just ask the same thing again, which is exactly what they do. And they say, just tell us the dream, we'll interpret it. And then the king starts to get real mad, right? He's like, you're trying to buy time. What's going on? I have firmly decided this. And after some of that back and forth, the wise men respond with this. They say, the astrologers, they answered the king, and they said, there is no one on earth. Do we have that up there? Because this is good. It's the Bible. Verse 10 to 12. chapter 2. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. The astrologers answered the king, "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked for such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans." And this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. Yikes. So as we dig into our first question, how did Nebuchadnezzar react to a threat to his kingdom? I see kind of two main things that we'll hit real quick. First, irrational rage, and second, a desperation for something supernatural. So first, irrational rage. So in response to this dream that he has, should Nebuchadnezzar just say, c'est la vie, kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall, I guess this is just my time, right? No way. This is his kingdom. He has built his whole life on this thing. All of his life has led to this. And he is about to execute all of the smartest, wisest people in his whole kingdom because of this. And I remember reading this and thinking, this has got like the markings of one of those like self-fulfilling prophecy movie things, right? He's wigging out and just slaughters everyone, and in his irrational rage, just destroys his own kingdom, therefore fulfilling the prophecy. Like this is the beginning of that, it seems. And I think, when our little K kingdoms are threatened, do you ever have some irrational rage, right? It's usually like an indicator emotion of someone's messing with your kingdom, and it's making you mad. I know in our house, a house of 4 kids, it gets so loud, and I can get so upset. Oh my gosh. So much so that, it's like, I don't even know what to say. I gotta leave. I gotta get out of here. And I think, this irrational rage, this has got to be where, screaming into the pillow comes. I taught our kids that. When you're mad, just scream into a pillow. And I'm, thinking about that this week, and I'm like, that is weird. Just of course you're going to scream and rage. So just do it in a pillow, and it's fine, I guess. So we have this irrational rage when our kingdom is messed with. That is an indicator emotion. There's stuff that bubbles up in us that we are not expecting, and it's just an indicator that someone's messing with your stuff. Secondly, a desperation for something supernatural. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was so important to him that the tools available, his wise men, the wisest people in the land, presumably, that the wisdom of the world was not enough. It's not often in our culture that we admit that there is nothing more we can do. It just doesn't happen all that often. There is almost always something else to do. There is another book you can read. There is another medication you can try. There's another therapist that you can go and see. I found an article this week. It was titled, "When Therapy Doesn't Work," written by a therapist, right? And their conclusion of this article, when therapy doesn't work, was this. He wrote, "It can be deeply frustrating when therapy doesn't work, but this is just the beginning of the journey, not the end. If you're willing to research your condition, be a good advocate for yourself, and keep trying until something works, you can feel better sooner than you expect." So the solution when nothing works is, well, just keep trying something. Yes, nothing works, but if you just keep trying something, maybe something will change. But what if you have tried everything? What if there's nothing left to try? There are situations like this. There are some, I know we're joking about some little K kingdoms, right? Some of those things are easy to control. What type of ice cream am I going to buy? The answer is Chocolate Trinity from Publix, by the way. But there are some kingdoms where we realize that this is outside of my control. That there is literally nothing that I can do for this situation, right? Our health, our mental health, losing someone we love. There are things that are outside of our control where the tools of this world are inadequate to help us deal with it. It is often in our desperation in some of these circumstances that we turn to something bigger than ourselves. When we are seeing rightly, because it's challenged, the limitations of the world, the limitations of ourselves, and how we can deal with these things. So Nebuchadnezzar, just like us in those situations, we're grasping for a supernatural hope because it seems like hope is lost as we see the vulnerability of our little k kingdoms. And I think this is a kind of sick twist, I think, of the enemy. I think we are thinking that we are kings and queens ruling our kingdoms, but I think this anxiety that can control us and produce this irrational rage and all of these things, I think, in fact, we think we are ruling our kingdoms, but maybe they are ruling us. Maybe they're ruling us. So Nebuchadnezzar, he loses his marbles at just the thought of his kingdom being destroyed one day. And then we have, in sharp contrast, Daniel's reaction to an actual threat, right? It's not just like, oh, there's a dream and this might happen. It's like, nope, we are here to kill you, Daniel. And if there was ever a time for irrational rage or something, that would be the time. Yet, Daniel, how does Daniel react? I see three kind of quick things we'll hit. He reacts with wisdom and tact, with prayer, which also has a desperation for something supernatural, and then with praise. So quickly, wisdom and tact. So Daniel, he knows the scriptures. He knows the promises of God. He was well-versed in the laws of Moses. He also was well-versed in the prophecies of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, in the Bible, most of his prophecies were about the exile and what that would look like and how God would take care of the Israelites while they were in Babylon. He would be familiar with this passage, Jeremiah 29, 10-14. It says this is what the Lord says, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. So these were things that Daniel knew, promises of God. And not only that, not only did he know the Bible, right? He had also experienced God's promises. God had protected him and his three buddies in wise men school, right? And let them preserve their faith and also rise to the top of the class. That was God that did that. That's Daniel chapter 1. You can go back and read that. God had delivered him and protected him. And so with great tact and with wisdom, he approaches the king and he asks for some more time instead of freaking out, which is what I would have done. And next, Daniel responds with prayer. And I think about, how I, like Nebuchadnezzar, would go immediately into problem-solving mode, right? Smart move, Daniel. Okay, I'm going to buy some time. Hey, king, I'm going to interpret your dream. Meanwhile, I would figure out how to get the heck out of there, right? And just run away, probably. I would call my friends, be like, all right, we need to figure this out. Let's go. And I think so often, we, with our anxious hearts, when our little k kingdoms are threatened, we're so used to fixing things so quickly. I think this is another kind of conditioning of our culture. We want quick answers. I want to look up the answer right now on Google. We're going to solve this and move on, right? So I don't have to worry about this anymore. We can't not know. I think that's a big thing that's hard in life today. Just not knowing and being okay with that. So Daniel, instead of stressing or strategizing, Daniel chooses waiting and praying in this situation. He chooses prayer with his closest friends, his fight club, if you will, like we talk about at Ocean City Church. And together they seek the mercy of God. Instead of instant action and quick remedy, Daniel waits and Daniel prays. And then lastly, praise. God reveals the dream and its interpretation to Daniel in a vision that night, and he responds with this praise. He says, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." So Nebuchadnezzar was searching for a supernatural hope. He needed something. Daniel had a supernatural hope. His hope was in the King of Kings, who gives wisdom, who shines light in darkness. Daniel's quick to offer praise because he knows that this power and wisdom did not come from him. He was fully dependent on God. In the rest of chapter 2, Daniel goes back to Nebuchadnezzar. He recounts the dream. He does exactly what he asks. He tells him the dream and he interprets it. Daniel is promoted to ruler of all of Babylon and the chief of all of the wise men. That's how the story ends. Amazing. Yay! Daniel! So we could say, don't be like Nebuchadnezzar, irrational rage, seeking the world's wisdom. Be like Daniel, right? React with wisdom and prayer and tact and praise. That would be a perfectly good sermon right there. Boom. You're welcome. But I think the reality of life makes that a hard place to end. I think a lot of people in this room are saying in their heads, well, that is all well and good, sure, but this is just a Bible story. This anxiety that I am dealing with, this fear and stress that I am dealing with, this fear of the future that I have, it is crushing me. Some platitudes to pray and praise are just not going to cut it today. And this brings us to our last question. How do we get the power to approach life's threats? And Daniel's interpretation of the king's dream leads us to the answer. Now remember, there was the image of gold and silver, bronze, iron, and clay. Each material, the interpretation went, Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold, and each other material was another kingdom that was going to rise up, right? So Nebuchadnezzar's fear was justified. Yeah, your kingdom is going to end, was the interpretation of the dream. Another kingdom is going to come. In fact, it was the Mede-Persian coalition in history that actually overthrew the Babylon Empire. And the interpretation prophesies this in Daniel 2, verse 44. It says, "In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end. But it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold to pieces." So I think what this is telling us, it's kind of like a bad news is good news kind of thing. So hang with me. What this interpretation is telling us is that God's kingdom is the kingdom that will last, which means your little k kingdoms that you have built will be destroyed. Maybe some of that fear and anxiety is a little justified. This is like God will not share his kingdom with anyone else. Our little k kingdoms will not last. Just like Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, there's only room for one king, big K, king. And I think we look at this prophecy and this truth that God's kingdom is the one that will last. And I think there's some fear there that says, well, okay, if my kingdom is crushed, then I am going to be crushed. Maybe it's hard to admit, but I've built my life on this. And I think what the amazing thing is the rock that crushes all of these other kingdoms. That rock is Jesus. He's the cornerstone. And what's amazing about this story of God and this kingdom, this upside down kingdom that he's building, is not only I'm going to crush your kingdoms yet, that's the bad news. The good news is you will not be crushed. Instead, I am going to be crushed in your place. Your kingdom, you're going to have to, and this is just the way of God, this is how it is, you're going to have to surrender that, because that's not the kingdom that's going to last. And do you see, I can just see God like talking to us today. It's like, can you see that your kingdom, this little kid that you think is so important, it is ruling you and destroying you and crushing you? Surrender that to me. That is how we get power to approach life's threats. God's kingdom is the one where instead of a fear of the future, there's a hope for the future. Instead of the kingdom crushing us, God says, I've been crushed so that you can be free of your little K kingdoms. Receive this supernatural hope that we are all looking for, that is sealed and stamped with the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, the chief cornerstone. And I think I'm glad the band's up here, because I'm forgetting the lyrics to the song. But we just sang it. I remember thinking they didn't know it because they don't know what all of this was today. But the fear's not my future, right? What's that line? Fear's not my future. You are? That's pretty easy. How hard is it to forget? I don't need you guys. But so how do I deal with these life's threats that seem crushing? When you're in the upside down kingdom of God and you're surrendering your kingdom to the actual king, King Jesus, fear now is no longer your future. He is. The supernatural hope has a name, and it's Jesus. And if you see that and remind yourself of that, the fears of this world, I think, will grow strangely dim when we can see his glory and his grace. I think that doesn't mean that life gets easier. Life is still hard this side of heaven. That's a whole nother sermon. But God has said, I know exactly how it feels, and I have taken care of all of it. You don't have to fear anymore. Fear is not your future. I am. Let's stand.